should actually wait for 2027. Of course, what they term as, the protest will be sabotaged, according to the DCP party leader. Right now, we've got that and much more. Of course, Finance Bill Act became law yesterday after President William Ruto actually assented it into law. Of course, that's what some of the things that actually you're waking up to this particular morning. My name is Macharia. We are live. Our streams are up on Facebook and YouTube, and you can as well send us your feedback through our SMS line. That is 23059. My name is Macharia once again, and Morning Live starts now. And President William Ruto has officially signed the Finance Bill the Finance Act 2026 into law at State House, Nairobi, paving the way for the implementation of various tax and revenue measures contained in the legislation. Speaking during the signing ceremony, the head of state said the new law is the product to extensive public consultation and is designed to improve fairness in tax administration without imposing additional burdens on ordinary Kenyans. President William Ruto noted that the public debate surrounding the Finance Act of 2026 had, in some instances, been characterized by misinformation, emphasizing that the measures contained in the law are intended to strengthen tax compliance, seal revenue loopholes, and create a more equitable taxation system. The president maintained that the reforms will enhance the government's ability to mobilize domestic revenue while supporting economic growth and improving service delivery across the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, education receives the largest allocation in this budget. Kenya shillings 784 billion, up from 526 billion in 2022 has been allocated by this budget. This investment reflects a simple belief: every child deserves the opportunity to learn, to grow, and to succeed. To honor our commitment to teachers on contract, 20,000 teachers will transition to permanent and pensionable term, as has been provided by this budget. Reliable and affordable energy remains essential to economic growth and household welfare. We have therefore allocated 34.1 billion to the sector, including 26.1 billion for rural electrification and grid expansion, Kenya shillings 3.7 billion for power generation, and Kenya shillings 3.2 billion for alternative energy technologies. And will work with counties to identify and develop signature tourism sites and products supported by marketing initiatives with the aim of moving our tourism arrivals to 5.2 million by 2028 and close to 1 trillion shillings in revenue, up from where we are today. This year, we reached a mark of 2.7 million tourists.
Now, DCP party leader Rigathi Gachagua has accused the government of planning to interfere with the upcoming Gen Z commemoration demonstrations meant to honor young people who lost their lives during the 2024 protest. Speaking during a press briefing, Gachagua alleged that state operatives were preparing to spend millions of shillings to hire criminals to infiltrate and disrupt what organizers have described as peaceful commemorative demonstrations. Now, the former deputy president claimed that the alleged scheme is intended to create chaos and disorder during the protest, thereby prompting a forceful response from security agencies. Gachagua further urged business owners to temporarily close their premises during the demonstrations to avoid potential losses should unrest occur.
Kipchumba Murkomen cannot arrest these goons because he's one who has recruited them, paid them, and deployed them. They will be working for the state to cause mayhem, to unleash terror, to allow the police now to come in and shoot people. Because the strategy is the state organizes goons accompanied by officers in plain clothes. They wreak havoc, they destroy property. Then the police now have a reason to come in. The goons withdraw because they cannot be shot, they cannot be arrested because they have been brought by the police, they have been brought by the government. and then kill innocent people, maim innocent people. I'm therefore asking agencies, strategy is not cowardice. Please, my sons and daughters, my grandchildren, consider. We need you alive. We need you to help us transform this country next year. You cannot do it when you are dead. You cannot do it when you are injured. The state has unleashed war against Kenyans as a strategy to intimidate Kenyans to stop free expression of what they feel and what they want. For that reason, I do ask all businessmen across the country, especially the targeted areas of Nairobi, the Mount Kenya region, Kajiado and Narok, not to open their businesses on Thursday, 25th June 2026, and keep them closed and ensure they are well protected. Let them organize people to protect their businesses even when they are shut.
Now, human rights defenders have urged police to exercise restraint and avoid excessive use of force during the upcoming commemorations of individuals who died during the June 2024 finance bill protest. Speaking alongside victims of police brutality in Nairobi County, the activists said that they will deploy body cameras and drones to monitor the peaceful demonstration and ensure all events are recorded for accountability purposes. The rights groups stressed the need for transparency and professionalism from law enforcement agencies, warning that any use of excessive force could undermine public trust and escalate tensions during the commemorative events.
It's about those that are unable to come to Nairobi, go to the relevant police stations within your locality and share a flag, wave the flag, share the flower to show that we are spreading love as much as we are demanding justice, and wave the white handkerchief to show we are peaceful.
And we are urging the government and urging even the goons who might be used to distract that please, it is just a peaceful day. It is a day to remember. It's not a day to strike. It's not going to be a day to fight. It is not going to be a day that we are going to be so bitter. We are bitter, yes. We are heartbroken, yes. But we only pray that that day it will be peaceful as we move around.
And we are telling the people who are saying why we should come out on June 25th that it's our right. Those who wrote the Constitution were aware, well, they put the Article 37 of the Constitution that give us right to picket and demonstrate. Commemoration is our right. We cannot just forget those people who lost their life while fighting for this nation.
Now, the Linda Mwananchi movement, led by Senator Edwin Sifuna, has postponed its planned Gusii region tour in a show of solidarity with the June 25th Gen Z commemoration scheduled to take place across the country tomorrow. In a statement, the team announced that the planned visit to Kisii and Nyamira counties, which are set to take place this Friday, will be rescheduled to July 3rd of 2026. The organizers said the decision was made in recognition of the planned commemoration of last year's June protest and to honor those who lost their lives during the demonstrations. According to the team, postponing the tour will allow supporters and leaders to join the nation in reflecting on the significance of the anniversary and paying tribute to what they described as fallen heroes.
I would like to read a statement by Linda Mwananchi. We wish to inform our members, supporters, and the public at large that the Linda Mwananchi Kisii and Keroka rallies scheduled for Friday, June 26, 2026 have been postponed to Friday, July 3rd, 2026. We will join other Kenyans of goodwill to stand in solidarity with the victims of the Gen Z protests of 2024 and their families, and in remembrance of those who were killed or are forcefully disappeared. We are alert to potential police and state-sponsored brutality and violence against the victims and their families during the commemoration activities. We reasonably anticipate unlawful arrests during the peaceful commemoration events. Consequently, it will be necessary to remain vigilant and engaged during this period. We call upon the police to ensure the safety and protection of all citizens who will participate in the peaceful commemoration activities. We are deeply disappointed by the government's decision to offer limited monetary assistance to the victims and their families, without ensuring that justice is done and accountability upheld. The lack of transparency in the compensation process and government refusal to allow the constitutionally mandated bodies to oversee the process is compounding the pain of the victims and their families. There is no pathway to reconciliation and a commitment never to repeat the killings and injure innocent Kenyans. Finally, late last evening, we were made aware of the decision by the ODM party, NEC, purporting for the second time to remove Secretary General Edwin Sifuna from office. On the face of it, the decision bears similarities with the first one in February, and procedural, unfair, and contrary to the party's constitution. After consultation with our legal teams earlier this morning, it has been decided to once again test the propriety of the purported ouster in the courts, because we are convinced it should suffer the same fate as the first one in.
Now, Cabinet Secretary for Health, Aden Duale, appeared in court yesterday to respond to allegations of contempt over the controversial construction of an Ebola treatment center in Laikipia County. Duale is accused of failing to comply with a court order that required him to provide detailed information on the agreement between the government of Kenya and, of course, the United States government regarding the project. The matter led to his summons to explain why he allegedly disregarded judicial directives issued in relation to the project at Laikipia Air Base. In his defense before the court, Duale stated that the United States government had publicly confirmed the suspension of cooperation following the court order that halted the implementation of the proposed agreement.
State of government publicly confirmed the suspension of the collaboration. The ministry understanding of the conservatory order was that the court had suspended the implementation of the proposed collaboration between the government of Kenya and the United States government in relation to the Laikipia Air Base facility. At all material time, it was never the intention of the ministry or myself as the Cabinet Secretary to disregard, undermine, or act in defiance of the orders of this honorable court. The fear that the Laikipia facility could serve as a vehicle for Ebola importation into surrounding community is scientifically unfounded. The facility is located at a military air base, placing it at significant geographical distance from populated areas with very strict access protocols, including reducing any theoretical.
Now, more than 30 families have been left homeless after devastating fire swept through Kianjogo village in Denderu ward, that is in Kiambu County, destroying over 20 houses and property worth millions of shillings. The blaze reportedly broke out in the middle of the night, catching residents by surprise as flames spread rapidly through the settlement, forcing families to flee for their lives with little or no opportunity to save their belongings. Other residents described scenes of panic and desperation as helpless families watched their homes and possessions go into flames. And many escaped with only clothes they were wearing as the fire consumed everything in its path within a short period.
Na hiyo moto ilianzia nyumba ya juu, sikupaanisha ni nyumba gani, lakini ikakuja ikateremka chini na ikachoma kila kitu. Hakuna kenye tuliokoa, uniform za watoto, vitabu, everything hakuna. Tuko tu venye tuko. Hatuna kitu ingine. Sasa ni maombi pekee itoke kwa Mwenyezi Mungu tu tusaidie. Juu venye tuko hapa ukiangalia huku kila kitu hakuna. Sasa tujui tutaanzia huko ama tutaanzia wapi. Mambo hapa imekuwa ngumu.
Nimeathirika pakubwa maana moto imeweza kutumalizia kila kitu, nyumba zote zimeungua, vitu zote zimeungua, hatuna mavazi, hatuna chochote, documents za watoto zimeenda na moto, watoto hawana mavazi, hata sijui kama wataenda shule, hakuna vitabu, hata sijui serikali, naomba tu mtusaidie. Tulitoka tu venye tuko. Jana tumepewa mahali pa kulala kwa makanisa, wengine tumeenda kwa majirani, na sasa leo hatujui tutakula ama hatutakula na hatujui penye tutalala.
Tulikuwa hapa familia more than 30. Sote tumeteketewa, yani kila kitu imeenda into ashes, kila kitu imeenda chini. Kama hapa hivi nimeshika ini birth certificate, ni rafiki yangu alikuwa ameniachia. Hii ndio kipande imepatikana, but zetu zingine zote zilipotea, zote ziliungua zote. Yeah. Okay, according to vile tumesikia, chanzo ilitokana na gas. Ile nini bana ilikuwa na kasoro. Sasa ile wakati ilikuwa inawashwa ikaleta shida, wakijaribu kuzimisha ikakuwa haiwezi kudhibitika tena. Na alafu hivyo ndio moto ilisambaa. Alafu na upepo pia jioni.
Ile kitu ilikuwa tunaomba tupewe simamoto ya karibu juu hii moto area hii kuna chomeka nini sana. Yes. Tusaidiwe tu kwa simamoto kama ni dedero hiyo inakuja. Hiyo karibu yani.
Simon Olingo, mimi ni mkaaji wa kaka na tuko na huzuni. Tunasema wale ambao wanasokuwa na usaidizi watusaidie, na kama ni governor, senator, kwa ile pesa ambayo wanasaidianga watu wajaribu kutusaidia nazo ili tusaidie watoto wetu wanaenda shule, tupate chakula na tuanze tunasaidia.
The Principal Secretary for Immigration, Belio Kipsang, has dismissed claims that the government has been issuing national ID cards and passports to foreigners, insisting that all registration procedures strictly follow the law and security checks. Speaking on the matter, Kipsang said the registration process is tightly controlled to ensure that only verified Kenyan citizens are issued with national identification documents, rejecting allegations of system abuse. He revealed that more than 1 million ID cards were produced between January and May this year, but noted that approximately 520,000 documents remain uncollected at various services centers across the country.
We have 520,000 IDs that have been processed but not collected. This year, between January and May, we have issued 1.5 million IDs in the last 5 months. Within the same time last year, between January and December, we issued 1.95, 1,950,000 IDs through the year. We've done 80% already in the first 6 months. Not even 6 months. 6 months is ending at the end of this month. We are projecting that by the end of this year, we shall have been able to produce 3 million.
Now, Kenya relies on imports for between 70 and 80% of all medicines used in the country, while the COVID-19 pandemic saw the government spend approximately 88 billion Kenya shillings on vaccine procurement to mitigate the impact of the disease. In a bid to reduce this heavy dependency on imported health products, the government has launched a national strategy on local manufacturing of health products and technologies covering the period of 2026 to 2030. Speaking in Nairobi during the launch, the Principal Secretary for Medical Services, Omar Oluga, said the government will strengthen and digitize systems within the health manufacturing sector to improve efficiency and self-reliance.
Of our medicines, go to any chemist or any hospital, 45% of the cost of our medicines is just middleman fees and freight. Painkillers that you're buying at 100 shillings, if we were to manufacture them here locally, you'd buy them at 55 shillings. And that will have a very huge impact in reducing the cost of healthcare to our citizens, but also in reducing the expenditure from social health authorities.
And since 2019, UNICEF has procured about $500 million worth goods and services from Kenya, distributed to more than 35 countries. This to say, localization is a strategy, but is also action.
The lesson was very clear. Health security can no longer depend entirely on supply chain beyond our borders. This is why the Kenya Health Products and Technology Local Manufacturing Strategy 2026 to 2030 is so important.
There's an interesting slide in this study saying about local capacities of medicines in various countries, like Bangladesh, 99%, India over 70%, Morocco over 70%, Algeria over 70%, etc., etc., etc. And Kenya sits at about 30%. The question is why? The why is we need government support. Policies that...
The United Democratic Alliance, UDA, has launched a membership registration drive in Vihiga County as part of efforts to strengthen its support base ahead of the 2027 election. The exercise was officially kicked off following the opening of a new party office in the county, with senior leaders expressing confidence in expanding the party's influence in the western region. Speaking after the launch, party leaders led by Muhai Member of Parliament Omukoko Milemba and Hamisi Member of Parliament Charles Gomeso as local party representatives and grassroots organizers to intensify mobilization efforts to consolidate support for President William Ruto's re-election bid in 2027.
Spika akija hapa Trans Nzoia labda alikuja mambo ya Fort Kenya, lakini si mambo ya Kenya kwanza. Akifanya mambo ya Kenya kwanza tunamuunga mkono, lakini akija ya Fort Kenya wacha asungumze tu kama Fort Kenya, lakini si kama kuidhinisha kiongozi yeyote yule.
Sisi kama wana Trans Nzoia tuna haki na kikatiba kuchagua viongozi wetu, na 2027 kazi yetu itakuwa nyepesi.
Broad based, tusikuwe na mapendeleo kusema fulani anajiona na nani, fulani anajiona na nani. Ikuwe free and fair, wananchi wenyewe waamue, lakini wasiamulie tu State House waseme tumekuja tunaenda kufanya vitu ya zoning, Trans Nzoia tunaweka mtu fulani, Trans Nzoia Bungoma tunaweka mtu fulani. Hiyo itaangusha chama cha broad based. Afadhali wacha wananchi waamue.
Tuna viongozi ambao wanatosha kujiamulia wenyewe. Si kwamba mtu atoke Bungoma aje tuamulie ni fulani ndio anatosha. Sisi wenyewe tunatosha kuamua ni nani. Tunajua tuna candidate wawili kwa UDA. Tuna Chris na kuna Bis.
Right, that story takes us on a first breather here on Morning Live, but we'll be back in just a bit.
You are watching EBN TV, transforming your world.
EBN TV cares about the growth of your business. To advertise with us, call 0725 386 501 or 0740 653 453. EBN TV, transforming your world.
You are watching EBN TV, transforming your world.
Right, welcome back to the program. You're watching Morning Live. My name is Macharia, and of course, let's take a look on what you're waking up to this morning as far as leadership and governance of this country is concerned. And I'm having the Daily Nation this morning as well as the Standard newspaper, just trying to make sense what it is that they have in store for us this particular morning. And let's kick it off with the Daily Nation newspaper. Of course, the story is to do with the commemoration which are scheduled for tomorrow, the 25th June of 2026. Of course, they say demonstrations in 2024 and 2025 led to the killing of at least 50 people and dozens more injured. Of course, they say Gen Z protest divide. That's the headline of the Daily Nation, of course, they say ahead of the march is planned for tomorrow to commemorate the second anniversary of the 2024 anti-finance bill protests. Authorities have promised to provide security for families of victims during the processions, but warned of a ruthless police crackdown on illegal actions intended to disrupt public order. Meanwhile, opposition leaders claim goons were being assembled by unarmed state operatives to infiltrate the demonstration and cause chaos, even as the clergy urge restraint. Of course, there is a picture there of CS Kipchumba Murkomen, former DP Rigathi Gachagua, KCCB chairperson Maurice Muhatia, and EAK Secretary Kefa Nyandega. Of course, let's take a look on what they had to say in regards to the Gen Z commemorations that are scheduled for tomorrow. That's on page 4 and 5. And Interior CS Kipchumba Murkomen warns police will ruthlessly deal with goons who infiltrate peaceful protest tomorrow. And as well, the former DP Rigathi Gachagua says DCP leader alleges a plot by state-backed goons to unleash terror on protesters in Nairobi and Mount Kenya. Catholic bishops condemn attack in churches by thugs and advise against chaos during the Gen Z march. That's according to the KCCB chairman Maurice Muhatia. And of course, EAK Secretary Kefa Nyandega says that the Interreligious Council of Kenya demands justice for those killed, injured, or have gone missing. All right, that's a story on page 4 and 5 of the Daily Nation this morning. Now, push for 43,000 Kenya shillings school fees increment. Now, parents will pay more to education, to educate their children in public senior schools if a new fees structure proposed by the principals is adopted by the government. All right. Now, extra county schools, that is cluster 2 and 3, could have the highest increment with a proposal that parents pay 83,682 Kenya shillings annually, more than double the current 40,535 Kenya shillings. That's on page 2. Of course, this, if this actually passes, that will come as a shocker to, the parents who cannot at least afford education. They say, the price of fees will actually double to as far as 83,000 Kenya shillings annually. All right, now parents will pay more to education, to educate their children in public senior schools if proposals made by the principals to the government for new fee structure are adopted. Now, the principal said the current fee structures was last reviewed in 2015 and faulted the government for failure to fully fund education despite rising inflation and the cost of living. Now, the document proposing the new fee structures was presented to the Principal Secretary for Basic Education, Mr. John Ololtua, during the annual Kenya Senior School Heads Association, that is Kesha Conference in Mombasa County. The document puts the new fees for day schools at 7,675 Kenya shillings. And learners in these schools, in principle, do not pay any fees, as this is covered by the new free day ordinary education. That's on Matters Education on page 2 of the Daily Nation. Now, other stories making headlines in the Daily Nation. As Ruto fights for Finance Act propaganda, quote unquote, President William Ruto stated that the Finance Act does not impose extra taxes on ordinary Kenyans, as he pushed back on what he described as propaganda on the content of the law. Now, the president said there were no taxes to hold land, mitumba, and mobile phone transactions. Instead, he touted positive provisions like extending tax benefits to mortgages financed by microfinance institutions and waiver of penalties on outstanding taxes. That's on page 6, when he was actually, assenting to that particular act to become law. All right. Now, it has become law, and of course, the financial year is actually scheduled to start on July 1st of 2026. All right. Of course, there's a picture there of President William Ruto addressing the nation after signing into law the finance bill and other bills at State House, Nairobi, yesterday. All right. Sifuna weighs options as Oburu faction stands the hit in ODM. That's on page 10 on matters politics. All right. Now listen to this story. Single women wear wedding rings to ward off unwanted men. Is that true? All right. That's the story featured on page 3 of the Daily Nation. You might want to take a look at that. And it continues to say, in her talk, she said, and I quote, we should all be feminists, celebrated novelist Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie spoke of a meeting, a woman who wore a wedding ring to a conference because she wanted people to give, quote unquote, give her respect. Chimamanda may have been highlighting a society that grants married women higher status and looks down on unmarried ones, but here in Kenya, some single women wear wedding rings for a different reason. Not to signify that they are engaged or married, nor the rings fashion accessories, but says, according to Nancy Washira, says, I am a single woman, but I have been wearing this ring since January this year. I'm doing so to avert unnecessary attention from men. All right. Now she said that the ring helps to set safe boundaries, deterring flirtatious men and allowing her to focus on work with fewer interruptions from men. All right. Now she bought her current pure silver ring for 15,000 Kenya shillings. And one wonders, at the end of the day, you'll someday maybe get married. And of course, these men have actually been seeing you with a ring. So what will convince the men to even actually find the courage to approach you with a ring? And as much as you are doing that to prevent what they term as flirtatious men, some of the things that you should consider as well in regards to that. Now, Experts Take says that that is Andrew Masama, chairperson of the Kenya Psychological Counseling Association, Lamu branch, says wearing a wedding or engagement ring can have both positive and negative psychological effects, regardless of whether a person is actually engaged, married, or single. Now, Mr. Masama says that finding the right person to get engaged to and even eventually marry is not a simple matter. He says people are often restricted to and depend on direct cues when assessing the mate value of a potential partner. He talks of a trend in which single women become attracted to married men, citing the wedding ring effect or mate choice scoping in humans, as some of the drivers saw a ring on the finger is not a guaranteed safeguard against unwanted romantic attention. That's according to an Expert's Take, the chairperson of the Kenya Psychological Counseling Association, Lamu branch. And I don't know what's your take on that, especially the ladies, This lady actually, that is Nancy Washira, says that she bought the ring for 15,000 Kenya shillings to avoid flirtatious men, quote unquote flirtatious men. And that's a story you can get exclusively on page 3, quite an interesting one, on page 3 of the Daily Nation. Now let's take a look on what's making headlines on the Standard newspaper this morning. And top story matters to do with protest and Gen Z second anniversary protest anxiety. And of course, there are some of the pictures, as you can see on the sidelines of your screen. There's a picture there of some state officials, especially the national government. There's a picture there of the head of state, that is President William Ruto, Inspector General of Police Douglas Kanja, Interior CS Kipchumba Murkomen, and as well as the Deputy President of Kenya, that is Professor Kithure Kindiki. And of course, on the back background of their images is, protests that were witnessed in the previous protest that has been there. All right. Now, it continues to say, as the country braces for tomorrow's anniversary protest, fear, suspicion, and political posturing have gripped the nation. From State House to church pulpits, businesses, and border stages, anxiety is mounting over what should unfold on a day meant to honor victims of the 2024 Gen Z uprising. Even as President William Ruto's administration promises compensation for families of those killed and assures citizens of their right to protest, warnings from top security officials, claims of planned disruption and deep mistrust among activists have heightened tensions. Of course, that story is featured on page 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the Standard newspaper. Let's take a look at that. And, some of the things that have been said that deserves all these pages. Now, nation on the age, as does this Gen Z protest stir anxiety across Kenya. Now, parents have issued meetings convened and other cancelled in anticipation of the June 25th protest, this is not just President William Ruto and his administration who are anxious. Young people, clergy, business owners, and even border operators are jittery about tomorrow's demonstrations. Now, the planned protest is intended to commemorate the June 2024 Gen Z uprising appear to have generated anxiety and tension within government as fears of widespread confrontation spread among opposition leaders, activists, business owners, and religious organizations. President William Ruto, who has ordered compensation for victims of police brutality, has on the other hand assured protesters that his administration will protect their democratic freedoms, but on the other has warned that the country must remain committed to law and order. His Deputy President Kithure Kindiki and the Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen have also warned protesters that they risk being met with force if they loot businesses or attack other Kenyans. He alleged that the protests were being organized by opposition figures intent on causing mayhem, and according to Kindiki, the planned demonstrations are not genuine June 25th, 2024 commemorations, but are aimed to advancing political interest. Murkomen claimed the government had intelligence indicating that what it is termed as political scavengers were keen to gain political mileage from Thursday's protest. On the other hand, on page 5, church calls for end to killings ahead of the demos. And the church has called for an end to protest killings ahead of the second anniversary of the June 25th, 2024 Gen Z demonstrations, even as it argued that the government urged the government to promote accountability in order to regain trust among Kenyans. It warned that the country cannot heal without confronting the deaths, disappearances, and injuries that marred the demonstration. In a separate statement on Tuesday in Nairobi, the Interreligious Council of Kenya, that is IRCK, and the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops, KCCB, urged the government, security agencies, and demonstrators to ensure Thursday's commemorations remain peaceful while demanding an end to the recurring loss of life during protest. Now, the clergy, who cautiously appeared to support the planned demos, said the country must honor the memories of Kenyans who died while exercising their constitutional rights. That's a story on page 5 of the Standard newspaper. Now, Ruto's costly trips clash with Gen Z austerity demand. That's on page 6. And of course, the trips are frequent, luxurious, and often marked by large convoys, according to some of the things that were actually highlighted during the previous protest. Of course, continue to say sometimes accompanied by a fleet of helicopters. Now, millions of shillings in mobilization handouts on each trip, and what critics describe as a pattern of excessive spending under President William Ruto's regime during his domestic tours. Now, the president earlier pledges to embrace austerity and rein in government expenditure, and now appear to have faded as he continues to invest heavily in countrywide engagements, widely viewed as part of his re-election strategy, at the expense of concerns that took the blood, sweat, and tears of the Gen Z. Now, at the height of the 2024 Gen Z protest, President William Ruto announced a series of austerity measures, including the suspension of all non-essential travel, by state and public officers aimed at reducing government spending. Now, however, Gen Z protesters who had hoped their pushback against wasteful spending would compel the government to prioritize austerity may now be dilutioned. The suspension of non-essential travel appears to have been short-lived, easing political tensions at a time since then domestic travel by President William Ruto has increased significantly, with the critics pointing to the return of high-cost trips. That's well on page 6 of the Standard newspaper. Finance bill, 2 years on, courts yet to answer crucial queries. Now, petitions filed on punitive taxes, police brutality, and illegal KDF deployment still gathering dust. Radioactive discontent, festers, and judicial delays led to the controversy each budgeting cycle. Of course, 2 years have passed since members of parliament attempted to push through the controversial Finance Bill 2024, an effort that ignited the widespread street protest by young Kenyans across the country. Some demonstrators were killed, others were maimed, and many abducted, although the country eventually moved on with this, although the scars remain. Now, the fundamental grievances of the majority of Kenyans, punitive taxation at a time of the rising poverty and unemployment, have not disappeared. Instead, they continue to linger unresolved in the corridors of courts and within the pages of hard-hitting reports produced by institutions such as the Law Society of Kenya. Now, when the bill was first tabled in Parliament, the Mount Kenya Jurists Association moved to court seeking an immediate suspension of the process. Their lawyer Kibe Mungai argued that the National Assembly was effectively railroading an unpopular and deeply resented policy down the throats of ordinary Kenyans, despite overwhelming public opposition expressed during the limited participation opportunities. That's on page 7 of the Standard newspaper this morning. Now, on page 3, talks about experts call for dialogue on food and water safety, and students beheaded and fingers chopped in gruesome murder. Family demands justice. Of course, this particular week we've actually been doing, these stories of cases of homicide, and it's quite unfortunate to see how inhuman people have been. Just the other day, some place, a family of 2, the mother and the son, are actually, found murdered by what it is believed to, they were murdered by, a sharp object, according to reports. Of course, it's quite unfortunate to see, the trend this particular week, how many people have actually died, and this particular week, how many people have actually died, and what might be the problem, what might be, the reason behind that, and what exactly are the police doing about it, and are these people actually being brought to book? All right, these are some of the questions that we should be asking ourselves. All right, now, students beheaded and fingers chopped in the gruesome murder. Family demands justice. A family of a 21-year-old Thika Technical Training Institute student, Elizabeth Ngina, is demanding swift investigation into her gruesome murder after her mutilated body was found in a rented room in Kiangombe Estate in Thika. Police from Thika West Sub-County have arrested the suspect linked to the killing of a second-year agricultural extension student whose headless body was missing. Fingers was discovered in the house believed to belong to her boyfriend. The murder has left Elizabeth's family, friends, and fellow students in shock, with the relatives now calling on detectives to move with speed and establish who killed her. Speaking after the discovery, Elizabeth's uncle Peter Mutunga said the family was initially misled into believing the student had been admitted to hospital after falling ill. Mutunga said the family learned from investigators that the suspect, believed to have been in a relationship with the deceased, told police he had left the house on Tuesday and returned later to find it locked from the outside. According to the account given to police, he allegedly used a spare key to open the room, but noticed that a washing basin placed beneath the bed was obstructing movement. On checking under the bed, he reportedly found Elizabeth's lifeless body Police officers from Thika Police Station visited the scene and found the body bearing deep injuries with 6 fingers missing and 32 stab wounds in the back. I don't know if what might be the problem, but why, first of all, will you kill someone, cut off his head and cut off the 6 fingers? This seems like a, something one would say cult or something, and or someone maybe watching movies, horror movies or something. It's quite confusing, of course, quite unfortunate at one of these happenings in the country. You never know who the person you are walking around with. People look so innocent, but when you look at whatever is happening in the country right now, it's quite unfortunate. And again, we need to pray for our country so that some of these things will at least reduce in their numbers or end entirely. All right. Now, another story related to that: man arrested for exhuming wife's body, burying it in a maize farm. Now, a man has been arrested in Antioch sub-county for exhuming his wife's body. The man, identified as Charles Spire, with his son Macharia Opio at their home at Kawere sub-location, East Kabuoch location. The body of Agnes Otieno, Pava's first wife, was buried on Thursday last week in Paya's homestead, but a few days after the burial, Paya allegedly decided to exhume the body. Paya, who is said to have been assisted by his son, exhumed the body and transferred it to another grave they had dug in a maize plantation outside their home. When neighbors realized the action, they reported the matter to a village elder, who informed the area assistant chief. Paya had reportedly objected to his wife's burial in the homestead. Instead, he wanted her to be buried in the maize plantation. And according to the Sub-County Police Commander John Losia, Paya's decision stemmed from the differences he used to have with his first wife. When Paya heard of Agnes' death, he objected to her burial in the homestead. He insisted that she be buried outside his compound, but his clan prevailed upon him and directed that the burial be done in the homestead. But a few days later, the burial Paya reportedly asked his son to help him exhume the body. You see some of the things I'm talking about. You're having, when this person was actually alive, you guys were having differences. Of course, when she's actually not alive, still, you have differences in Makasiriko, this person who's already slain. Right, that's a story in Homa Bay County on page 3 of the Standard newspaper this morning. Now, away from that, remorseful, Duale spared jail, warned against more defiance. Now, Health Cabinet Secretary Aiden Duale yesterday narrowly escaped a jail sentence according to the Standard, after the High Court accepted his apology over contempt of court. But Justice Patricia Nyaundi issued a strict warning that any future breach of court orders will be dealt with severely. Duale presented himself to the Milimani Law Courts, where he pledged compliance with judicial orders that halted the establishment of a US-backed Ebola quarantine facility at the Laikipia Air Base in Nanyuki. Now, the decision offers relief to one of President William Ruto's trusted allies, who petitioners wanted jailed for 15 months without an option of a fine, after the court found him guilty of allowing continued construction of the controversial facility despite 2 orders. In her ruling, Justice Nyaundi noted that Duale had complied with directions requiring him to appear before court, rendered an equivocal apology, and responded to contempt charges. Now, Justice Patricia Nyaundi yesterday said, who's the High Court judge, I will qualify that it is a strict warning and that any hint of non-compliance with orders of the court will be noted. All right? That's on matters corridors of courts, where Health CS Aiden Duale had actually, appeared before the courts. Gachagua appeals for High Court verdict on impeachment. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua has filed a notice of appeal challenging the High Court judgment that upheld his impeachment while awarding him 50 million Kenya shillings for the violations of his fair trial rights. In a notice filed before the Court of Appeal, Gachagua says he is dissatisfied with the decision delivered by Justices Eric Ogola, Anthony Mrima, and Frida Mugambi on June 8th. The appeal marks the latest chapter in the legal battle arising from Gachagua's removal from office in 2024 through an impeachment process that was subsequently challenged in court by him and 56 other co-petitioners. That's on page 2 of the Standard newspaper. Matters College of Justice as well. Now, EBL 6 comments intervention over conflicting court orders. Now, the East African Breweries, that is the EABL, has written to the Chief Justice Martha Koome seeking intervention over conflicting high court orders surrounding the proposed 300 billion Kenya shillings sale of Diageo's stake in the brewer of Asahi Group Holdings in Japan. That's as well on Matters Corridors of Justice on the second page of the Standard newspaper this morning. I'm trying to look on what's making headlines in the world of sports in regards to whatever is happening in FIFA World Cup. Now, 2026 FIFA World Cup, June is actually taking place, from June 11th to July 19th. Of course, it's taking place in 3 nations, that is the USA, Mexico, and Canada. All right, they are co-hosting these particular matches. And of course, top story on the back page of the Daily Nation says African survival, 9 teams fight for slots in round of 32. It is the end of the road for Haiti, Jordan, Tunisia, and Turkey, as they have been eliminated in the early exits. That's on as far as FIFA World Cup is concerned. Now, playing on Wednesday, in Group L, that is Panama versus Croatia at 2 a.m. and Group L, Colombia versus DR Congo at 5 a.m. Group B, Bosnia and has a Govana versus Qatar at 10 p.m. today. That's on Wednesday. Group B, Switzerland versus Canada at 10 p.m. as well. Now, playing on Thursday, Group C, Morocco versus Haiti at 1 a.m. Group C, Scotland versus Brazil at 1 a.m. Group A, Zechia versus Mexico at 4 a.m. Group A, South Africa versus South Korea at 4 a.m. And Group E, Curacao versus Cote d'Ivoire at 11 p.m. And Group E, Ecuador versus Germany at 11 p.m. That's some of the matches that will be played today and tomorrow in East African time. All right. Things looking up for Messi. Of course, Messi sets World Cup scoring record as stars outshine weather. Now, the 8-time Ballon d'Or winner turns 39 today. Lionel Messi became the World Cup's all-time leading goal scorer on Monday night after to fire Argentina into the last 32 as France overcame weather kills before advancing to the knockout rounds alongside Norway. Now, Messi's record-breaking display was centerpiece of the other gripping day of World Cup action, where the star names once again shone the brightest. Let's take a look on the Guinness World Records. Now, all the records broken by Lionel Messi is actually 18 most FIFA World Cup final goals by a football player and 28 most FIFA World Cup matches played in by an individual and 18 most matches won by a player at the football FIFA World Cup. And this, of course, this sums up to 2,489 most minutes played by in a football FIFA World Cup. All right. Now, Lionel Messi, in numbers, Messi is the third man in FIFA World Cup's history to score in 6 consecutive games 3 times. And 18 goals Lionel Messi has scored at the World Cup, and he has scored against 42 different nations. And 201 is actually Lionel Messi's appearances, and 12 World Cup goals has scored after turning 35. And 182 Messi's goal contributions. All right. Now let's take a look at the results at the 2026 FIFA World Cup on Monday. Group J in Arlington, Texas, Argentina versus Austria. Argentina edged Austria 2-0 in Santa Clara, California. Jordan versus Algeria, they went on 1-2. And Group I in Philadelphia, France versus Iraq. Iraq was thrashed 3-0 by France. Now in East Rutherford, New Jersey, Norway versus Senegal. Norway took the lead with 3-2. All right, that's what's up on matters to do with FIFA World Cup 2026. It is exactly 21 minutes past the top of the hour. Thank you so much for keeping me company until this particular minute, but be sure to catch up with the subsequent bulletins later on in the day at 1, 4, 7, and 9 p.m. My name is Martin Macharia. Have yourself a lovely day. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. God bless, and as always, let's do this again when God says you do.